Okay, hey everybody, Dan Fitzpatrick here, stockmarketmentor.com, and I want to look at IREN today. First, we'll just start with the active trade list that members have been tracking, and by the way, this thing has been screaming for a while. We've got a couple stinkers here that are red, Coinbase being the worst, and that's only 5.5%. But then our others like the Bitcoin miners, hence they're moving beyond Bitcoin and are now global hyperscalers. They've done the same thing. It's looking like they're doing the same thing as Jensen Huang did with NVIDIA, where he started off ages ago, like 20 years ago, making the best GPUs for gaming. And then along comes quantum computing and AI and all this other stuff. And then you go like, well, shit. Those things are pretty good for that too. And so they kind of found a brand new industry with the same product. I'm simplifying things a little bit, but hopefully you get the point. Well, now we're kind of seeing the same thing again with all these miners. These Bitcoin miners are, they're power intensive. I mean, electricity, nuclear power, they're really driving this whole aspect of must have more energy between quantum computing and just all the AI stuff that's happening. There's just a lot of need for that stuff. And so these Bitcoin miners are saying, hey, we have quite a few of these Blackwell GB300 graphics processing units, so maybe you guys would like to use them. And so what they're really doing is they're switching to a different, not a different industry, but like a related industry. And what happened with IREN was they entered into a multi-year cloud services contract with Microsoft. So we've been in this for quite a while, since 28 bucks. So this has been a really good trade for us, and we do have earnings coming up. Here's the chart. Got earnings coming up later this week on Thursday, I think that is. Let me check my handy dandy calendar. Yes, Thursday it is. So I think at that point, we're probably going to be taking definitely going to be taking half off the table, maybe a little more than that. And this is just for members. If you're not a member, you don't know about this trade. But we'll be taking at least half off the table, and that locks in, it locks in a profit to where if the stock falls to below zero, you'll still have a profit. So this is what we need to do when we've got just a great trade on. Even if you're still bullish on the stock, you still need to be taking some off the table just as a tip of the hat to risk management. But there's not necessarily a need to take it all off. It's totally your choice. But I'm putting the cart before the horse now. Back to the horse. Right now, so the stock is up 13%, but at one point today, it was up quite a bit more than that. It was up over 20%. And so this has been a heck of a move. Now you got to look at this and say, okay, that news is baked into the stock price. Now, the next catalyst would be again on Thursday when the company reports earnings. I'm sure they'll have something to say about this, but the question is how much? So I really kind of question the reliability of any further catalysts to the upside before this stock takes a breather. So this is definitely not something that I would be buying into earnings. If you're doing that, look, I hate to tell you this, but I have to. You're late. Okay, just wait for the next party. There's going to be one that's coming. This would not be it, though. So we want to just book our profits. Let a little bit run if you want to. I think it's always a good idea on a stock that's trending so strongly, unless you're 100% short-term swing trader. When you've got a stock that's pulling up the 200-day, pulling up the 50-day at a little steeper angle, the price itself is going even steeper. You kind of want to stay on that train as long as you can, but just not too long and not too big. having a little position as this runs higher and higher and higher is not a bad thing, but you just kind of want to be close to the exits. We'll put it that way. I hope you get what I'm talking about here. Members, if you did not get into today's strategy session, you may want to check that out. I have a lot to say about how you truly manage your behavior. And it had nothing to do with discipline. I'm just letting you know. It has nothing to do with discipline or breathing exercises or yoga or meditation or any of that crap. I'm giving you the straight dope. And if you watch this video and you take what I'm saying to heart, you're going to have the rest of your career to thank me. And please do. Okay? All right, that's it. That's all I got for you guys. I will see you all on the backside.